Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, April the 21st, 2023. Now, as you perhaps realise, hardly anyone watches this channel. On some days, I get as few as 8 people watching. I don't know why. I suppose I've just started. I've only been up for 2 months, so what else can I expect? Why should I expect any more than 8 people to come here? So, yesterday, I put up a video about April the 20th, and I just mentioned that it was Hitler's birthday, and I put that in the title, and suddenly I get over 200 visitors. Now, I know that in YouTube terms, 200 is nothing. It's not until you're at 15,000 that it means anything at all. But still, for me, 200 people was quite a lot. So it goes to show that maybe it's all about what I put in the title. Maybe all my videos I should mention Hitler's name, or maybe not. Still, I would like more people to visit my channel. I know it's not great, but I do need a bit of encouragement sometimes. And yeah, if you could subscribe, that would be good. And if I get a few more subscribers, maybe that will motivate me to maybe buy some new clothes perhaps, or maybe to buy a new camera or something like that. Now, as far as what I wanted to talk about today, America. Yeah, America is a disaster, we know that. But what is interesting is that America under the Biden regime has turned out to be so bad. Now, I do understand that Donald Trump did lay the foundations for Biden's disaster. But what has been spectacular about the Biden catastrophe has been the total destruction of its foreign policy. You know, it's a foreign policy disaster. So I want to see if I can somehow use astrology to work out why America is such a foreign policy disaster. Now, to give you an idea about this, in the good old days, when people were running a country who knew what they were doing, even if they were totally immoral and totally evil, but they still knew what they were doing, they had some basic understanding of geopolitics. Now, for example, let me just show you what I mean. So let's go to okay. So look, here is the horoscope. That's Antony Blinken's horoscope. He is the current Secretary of State, and in a way, he is the summation of American foreign policy. He is the representative of American foreign policy and how bad it is. Now, you contrast that with, say, Henry Kissinger. I know a lot of people have serious problems with Henry Kissinger, who's going to be 100 next month, but you can see the versatility in his chart. Henry Kissinger, he was around the 60s, 70s. He ruled American foreign policy. Look at all that Gemini. Sun, Mercury, Mars in Gemini, ascendant in Gemini. And so, perhaps the genius of Henry Kissinger is he wasn't fixed to a particular course of action. And I think America in those days understood geopolitics. There were perhaps three big powers in the world: China, Russia, and the United States. Now, it should have been a golden rule of international politics that if you're America, you need to keep Russia and China apart. And America in the 1970s was really good at doing that, even under Nixon. And Nixon, was able to broker diplomatic relations with China, and so he was able to keep Russia and China apart, and that was really important. That's what you've got to do if you're if you're America, if you're the United States. Now, at the moment, it's quite obvious, at least it was until a few years ago, that the big threat to the United States isn't Russia, it's China. What you should be trying to do is keep Russia and China apart. But no, this is not what's happened. As we know, America, United States, has become increasingly isolated outside the Western world. It's fallen out, obviously, with Russia. It's falling out with China. Okay, that sort of happened under Trump. There are issues with, places like Brazil and so forth. So the United States is a foreign policy disaster, and so the Secretary of State at the moment is Antony Blinken. So I haven't really studied his chart. I don't have his time of birth, but he was born on April the 16th, 1962. So he's just had his birthday. So he's just turned 61. So can we see in this chart anything that indicates how badly run the United States foreign policy is? So the first thing to notice about his chart is that he is an Aries. I suppose he likes to take the initiative. He likes to do things his way. It's a very strong sun. Yeah, his sun in Aries, it's exalted in Aries, so it's strong. There's Mercury, right conjunct Mercury. Now, Mercury is a planet of thought. It's a planet of working out what you should do next, thinking things through. Now, I understand that Antony Blinken is a really clever person. He went to Harvard, he speaks fluent French, so forth. But that doesn't mean he can't make mistakes. Now, a few days ago, I looked at the horoscope of the woman who is the vice president of marketing at Bud Light. She's called Alyssa something, and she had a close Sun Mercury conjunction in Pisces, and I know this type of conjunction is not entirely uncommon. It's the Sun and Mercury are always quite close together. But again, I suggested that there was a judgment error in her chart because with this marketing campaign fronted by some trans person. So there was an error of judgment. She couldn't see what was going on. Even if someone else was responsible, it was happening on her watch. Now, likewise with Blinken, he has a Mercury which is completely dominated, really close to a strong sun in Aries. So I think what I would see with Blinken is he has his own ego, he has his own ideas. There is a way he sees the world. I mean, he is someone who's been involved in all the nastiness in American foreign policy for so long, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, all of those events which have caused so many people to die. He's been involved in all of that. And perhaps it's all part of his ego, his upbringing. He was, I believe, his relatives, whatever, were involved in, were ambassadors and so forth. So maybe his father was an ambassador, something like that. So he was to the manner born, and or less charitably, he had a diplomatic spoon. He was born with a diplomatic spoon in his mouth. So there you have it. He can't reason properly because of his ego, because of his upbringing, because of everything he is, and that's his sun in Aries. Now, that sun in Aries is contrasted with his moon in Virgo. It gives a really different energy. Moon in Virgo is really into details. It's quite boring, all things being equal, Moon in Virgo. It wants everything done right. I think it's a little petulant, Moon in Virgo. And I'm reminded of, I think he cancelled a trip to China after that balloon thing. I think that's a very sort of Moon in Virgo thing, to just get upset about some little irrelevant detail. He's perhaps, with his Moon in Virgo, allowing the details to to get in his way. And with that moon in Virgo, in Indian astrology, his moon in Virgo is quite separate from the rest of his planets. I don't count Uranus and Pluto because they are the discovered planets. So in Indian astrology, he would be categorized as having Kemaduma yoga, which is about being in some way isolated, not with the rest of the crowd. Now, I don't know about his personal life and his friends and whatever, whether he feels himself to be a loner. That's not the point. When you put someone with that moon in as Secretary of State, it's perhaps the United States that feels the effects of Kemaduma yoga, becoming increasingly isolated. Now, another thing going on in his chart is his Mars. His Mars is exactly 135 degrees from Neptune. Now, I know it's his Mars, but he has become Secretary of State. He is someone who is getting involved with violent action, who is planning whatever, giving weapons to Ukraine, other places, all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I assume he knew about the Nord Stream, the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline, because America blew it up and prevented Germany from using Russian gas. So I assume he knew about it. And Neptune, planet of gas, and it's exactly sesquiquadrate his Mars. So that certainly fits someone who might have been responsible for the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline. But also, it's about using force, that's the Mars, in a way that is confused, that doesn't really get the full picture. And so I think there's a problem there. So he's going to throw weapons at something without really thinking it through. And that's not just about Ukraine. He had a more junior position in the State Department and other places in previous regimes, but Syria, Libya, American involvement there, we can see what a disaster it was. So aside from that, he has got Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. It's exactly there. It's pretty close to the Mars-Saturn midpoint. It's conjunct the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So I'm wondering what that means. If you take it literally, it would be a quick death. That's very nice, having Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn midpoint. All things being, when he finally dies in however many decades' time, death can happen any time, I suppose. It'll be a quick death, at least if, according to the theory of having Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. But there may be a more unpleasant way of looking at it. Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn may be someone who kind of enjoys getting off on doing activities where a lot of people die. In a junior role, he's been responsible for Syria, in Libya, and now in Ukraine he has a senior role, and because of him and people like him, in the Ukraine, a lot of people have died. Victoria Nuland, she has the Aries point on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and he has got Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So when he sees violence, maybe whether it's a Nord Stream pipeline blowing up, whether it's Russian soldiers getting killed, whether it's an attack on the bridge in Crimea, that Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn may really get off on it. Of course, he's not going to admit it, but I think that might be how that Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint is working out. So there are some thoughts on Antony Blinken's chart. Now, I must emphasize that I do not have his time of birth, so it's difficult. It's difficult to be precise. I only have his. I only have his date of birth. By the way, April the 16th, 1962. He was born on Charlie Chaplin's 73rd birthday. In other words, he shares the same birthday as Charlie Chaplin. I don't know what that means. A lot of people like to use the term clown world when describing what's going on, and yeah, maybe he's one of the clowns. And of course, clowns are scary. So, as far as today's stars are concerned, there's not a great deal going on, I don't think. We've had the new moon. The moon is starting to move away from the sun. There's a moon. It's a time when we can start to begin our new projects, though with the moon is making a conjunction to Uranus, you'll notice. So it could be a time when we can, when we can surprise people, or maybe we'll be surprised ourselves. So emotionally, we could be tense, and we need to find a way of expressing that tension. The moon also is conjunct Mercury, so perhaps we're going to be quite spontaneous in what we say. It's spontaneity in a way, in the sense of sort of it all builds up and then suddenly it comes out. We have to say it. We can't help ourselves, and we don't mind too much about the consequences. So what else is going on? I've already said that Pluto is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. This is a very violent time. Mars and Uranus is about weapons, guns, rockets, whatever. We're trying to transform through... The world is trying to transform through violence. And the Sun is also on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. In fact, yesterday's new moon was on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So that Mars-Uranus midpoint is really strongly emphasized at the moment. And, one would really expect, for example, the Ukraine war to be getting even hotter, things to be really, really happening there. I mean, of course, we're not told what's going on, so we may never actually see we may not actually see this in the real world, because it's just not reported. It's just not reported in the news. Now, I do want to end on a positive note about today before I look at the 12 star signs. And Uranus is on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. It's aspecting the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. You can actually see this. There is Jupiter, there is Venus, and Uranus is right in the middle. The chart is not set up proportionately, but if you were to set it up proportionately, you would see Uranus on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. And this can be sudden happiness, getting a brilliant surprise, and suddenly feeling just really happy about things. From a romantic point of view, if we're already in a relationship and it's going well, things could really come together. We could be really happy. I'm going to actually tell you what Reinhold Ebertin says about Uranus on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, just to cheer you up. I know he'll say something wonderful, and he says Uranus on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, the capacity to express joy wholeheartedly, the ability to become popular quickly, sudden happiness in love, quick fulfillment of wishes, and joyous excitement. So it could be a great day, provided we avoid things that are complicated and we stay away from guns, bombs, dangerous stuff, and we just keep it happy, keep it light, and it can be a great Friday. Now, as far as the 12 signs are concerned, Aries, 4 stars. Money does matter, but so does your creative and artistic genius. Taurus, 3 stars. There is something you're holding on very tightly to. Perhaps you should let go. Gemini, 2 stars. You feel a certain sense of disconnection. It's a passing phase. Cancer, 4 stars. Friends can do strange and surprising things. Leo, 3 stars. You continue to be accident prone, but at work there's a new dawn. Virgo, 3 stars. The film Altered States talked about getting to the centre of your consciousness and finding nothing. Today, that might resonate, but if you clean the board, tabula rasa, there are new possibilities. Libra, 4 stars. You understand what others miss. Scorpio, 3 stars. Relationships take a surprise turn. Sagittarius, 3 stars. A time to set the scene rather than make a scene. Capricorn, 4 stars. Don't be afraid to shock. Aquarius, 3 stars. If there's mayhem and chaos, consider your own responsibility. Pisces, 4 stars. Your carefully chosen words seep in like ever-present mould in a damp ceiling. Anyway, that's the astrology done with. So what I'm going to do now, as usual, is to look at the I Ching. I cast the coins, and the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 3, which the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching describes as difficulty at the beginning. So when we start a project today, when we do anything today, we may find that to begin with, it's not great. Things just don't happen. It's really slow, and we can't get much done. But we shouldn't worry about that too much. We need to keep persevering, and when we do that, we're going to see a change. The hexagram difficulty at the beginning transforms to hexagram number 24, which is the turning point. So the turning point represents a time when everything suddenly comes together. Now, the I Ching does suggest, though, that it may take 7 days before, or that's 7 days is a symbolic measure, but it may take a few days before we get what we want. And so the question is, what do we do in the interim? And that leads me to the picture. Now, the Wilhelm translation talks about the custom of sealing the passes. So when we're in this process of making a change, we should block everything down. We'd block everything off, perhaps not interact too much with the world. This is a time of change. We don't want to get any, we don't want interference. We need to focus on what's important, just conserve our resources. And then when the requisite amount of time has passed, we can open the passes again, and we can have the turning point when that thing which started so badly with difficulty at the beginning, it will suddenly move. So if you're worried that something isn't happening as quickly as you'd like it to, don't worry, because soon enough you'll get what you're looking for. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for today, and I will talk to you tomorrow.